About that. From the very beginning, we started out here, people were thinking, I don't know if I can build anything on this. I don't know what we can do, but let's put it out in open source and see what the community does and see what people do. And as you can see, they've been busy. There's a lot of really cool things. We're seeing a lot more content, a lot more adoption, just a lot of growth. But before we get started, I do want to thank our sponsors, that are in attendees. So please give them a round of applause for our Platinum AWS and Backtrace. And with that, one thing that I do want to mention is we have a code of conduct, and that is if you see any problems or anything that's an issue, please notify one of the event or staff. It's one of the things that we really adhere to at the event here. So just keep that in mind, please. So for starters, the future is now. Everything that we've been working on, everything that we're pushing towards, trying to build new innovations, looking at how we're doing things with games or digital simulation or in robotics, all of the different areas. But the difference is by using an open source type engine, we're actually helping innovate not just open source in general, but also commercial applications at the same time. This is something that helps our entire industry grow. So the future of what we're trying to plot, that truly is now. So let's kind of take a look at some of the things in 3D that are really involved in what we do and where you might apply this. So if you look in the space, games. This one's pretty obvious, right? Because 3D engines, that's been driving it forever and a day. And we know games are at the heart of it. But then you also have robotics. If you look at how they train, how they simulate, how they do a lot of different things within that field, visualization, reporting, all of it comes down to, a lot of times, a 3D engine for how it can see its space or what it can do. Or even if you're trying to build the training models behind it. And then, of course, motion pictures, film. I mean, all of us have seen an animated film at one point or another. That's driven out of the 3D industry. I mean, we all started a long time ago with Quake and all of that, but the 3D cards and things that have been built, they've driven so many different industries, and we see it every day in motion pictures. And then also with AR, VR, XR. So think about it. We're talking about driving next generation of how you will experience life, how you'll actually breach that boundary between what's physical and what's digital. And that does come down to 3D in so many different ways. And then, of course, AI and machine learning. If you want to train something that didn't physically happen, if you want to create a model where it can recognize what to do, you need thousands of hours of video. So unless you think you can find somebody or try and build a Hollywood set, 3D comes in to save the day because you can use physical-based materials and you can build these simulations. You can train them for things that haven't happened in scale. Put it up in the cloud. You can get hundreds of thousands of hours by spinning up thousands of machines. And then, of course, digital twin. That boundary between what happens in real life and what happens in the digital world. Now we can start crossing that boundary. We start talking about things in the future like metaverse or how we'll actually work on remote production within, say, a plant. Digital twin is there to actually allow you to do that. We know the GPS coordinates, we know how to translate them into space, and we can cross that boundary. And then, of course, manufacturing for how robotics and things will do simulation. It's kind of hard to have a robotic arm if it doesn't know how to act. But once you use things like 3D, you can start training them for that. Automotive, if you haven't noticed, most of your cars no longer have analog displays. They all have LED displays. Guess what? They're using, on a lot of them, a 3D engine or a form of one. And it's becoming more prevalent. As a matter of fact, some of the new automotive stuff is really cool, where we're seeing augmented reality for directions up on the windshield. And they're also using depth perceptible type of displays where you can actually see the depth of where something is on the display itself, and they're using these engines for that. And then, of course, healthcare, wellness, things for PTSD, where they can put you in an environment where you hear music and you have soft images and environments. These are becoming ways to actually start helping people in a 3D landscape. And then, of course, architecture. When you want to build a building, but you don't know what the cost will be, what happens if the sun shines on this building at a certain angle? Is it going to cost more money for what they have to do to operate it? Do I make the windows shorter, smaller? How does it affect the actual bottom line picture and cost? It comes into play for architecture. And then, of course, the magic word, metaverse, right? We all know this one. It's the most abused word in the world. And but it's not going to be much of an experience. If you don't have 3D involved, it'll just be kind of a text-based mud, and we don't want that. So we know that 3D is definitely going to be part of the metaverse. So keep that in mind. So we are one. If you think about it, we had our first birthday. So many different things in our milestones, so many things that we've worked on and what we're achieving. You know, if we take a look at what we're doing for these events, you know, we've almost doubled where we've been, almost tripled it where it's at. Our community is continually growing. We have more partners joining us every day. And it's exciting because it's in motion, it's happening. And it's all because of you. It's all because of the community that's actually making this happen. So if anything, I would say and applaud for everyone here and everyone in the community. You're the reason this is happening, and this is the reason how we're able to move and succeed. So it's funny if you take a look. It's been an amazing year already. We've had Epic, Microsoft, Lightspeed Studios, Oppo, Heroic Labs, and Kutztown. So these are a lot of our new partners that have joined us that also understand the vision of open source software. Not only from, you know, and a lot of people were kind of surprised to see Epic, but here's the thing, when you think about it, it makes sense. There's not just going to be one engine on the planet, and there are a lot of table stakes that can be shared. That means that companies, when it comes to open source, you can move some of the things you have to maintain into open source and focus on your innovations and still be compatible and work with whatever the future is. It's a way of future-proofing yourself no matter what turn the economy does or how the industry moves. And it's a really important piece of it. And then, of course, having great partners like Microsoft, Lightspeed, Oppo, Heroic. Kutztown's kind of interesting because it's a university. And people are wondering, why is that something that's interesting? Because we need more C++ game developers. This engine is in C++. Where do you think games are written on? If you see Call of Duty, if you see all the majors, I'll give you a hint. They're not written in BASIC. They're written in C++. And so universities are recognizing that there is a big need to find and build the next generation of game developers in C++. And having these in open source is really important because when students contribute to an open source code base as C++, your work, when it gets merged, becomes part of your resume. When a job employer goes to look for you and they look in that repository that you point them to, they get to see your work already. You've already halfway tested out. They're already interested in you because they've seen your work. So having universities start creating curriculum and getting involved is a big, big play, and it's a win across the board for all of industries for 3D. We now have over 25 member companies in this fast-growing family. You know, Adobe, AWS, Huawei, Intel, you know, Red Hat, Kythera, Hadean, a lot of others, and we thank all of them for their steadfast support. So thanks to you, we're on an incredible path. All the collaboration from everyone, all the pieces that we're doing, it's putting us into this environment where we have kind of a world's first high-fidelity AAA engine that can be used by any and everyone for how they want to use it. So key accomplishments, let's talk about where we've been in the past year. What's going on? So we have over 500 active online participants. So when we talk about this, that means that when you're trying to get support, you're trying to figure out who to ask a question, you drop into Discord, there are probably 500 people at any point in time that are online that may be able to answer your question, or you may be able to answer their question instead of just waiting for something to come back on a mailing list. 8 million changes to the lines of code. That is a lot of active development across the board. 200 authors of the code. So we have a lot of growth on who's contributing in multiple companies. And a 70% increase in our total commits. Now think about that. It's in 1 year. Okay? That is a ridiculous amount of development in motion for such a young project. And a 200% increase on the stars and forks of the repository, as well as our Discord user growth. So this train already left the station. It's moving, and it's amazing to see what the community is doing. Diversity. So if we look at, you know, we started with a handful of key partners and key players within that. And so it's been great to see this actually growing quite a bit. In the past year, we have an 80% increase in unique contributors that are actually driving into this project. That kind of growth, think about it, year over year. It takes a life of its own. It grows at an amazing pace. The proof point behind that is that if we look at where we started when we had the leaders of each one of these areas for the special interest groups, Red Hat, Huawei, these are a lot of different companies that are also becoming the leaders in these spaces. They're becoming the chair and co-chair, helping drive all of these forward. This is a key part that makes sure that our community grows diverse, that it's not just being driven by one single agenda or one single thing. Having companies inside of a project like this is really important because it allows it to grow both horizontally and vertically on what the needs are of the industry and what they're trying to accomplish. Key part about an open source project working commercial is that it's got to meet the needs of the community and the companies involved. It has to be viable for it to grow. And then, of course, our top 10 creators, we take a look at who's kind of sniffing around, who's been jumping in and out of our repository. There's some really cool tools out there to let you know. And you'd be surprised. Of course, we know AWS are involved, but then you'll see that Google's been looking around and Rogue Rocket, Ubisoft. These are a lot of companies that have people who are in GitHub, but they've been looking through, or they've been making PRs, or they've been submitting tickets. They're not a part of the foundation, but they're already supporting it because there are pieces that they are taking from it or using. So our community is always bigger than what we can visibly see. And then, of course, we have some of our highest star followers as well. These are people that have starred the project and are really kind of keeping an eye on it. When changes and things come out, they get notifications. They know what's going on. So it's not just people who are contributing, it's people who are watching it. That kind of interest lets you know, are you really getting to where you're trying to be? Because without it, it just becomes a dead project. So it's a key metric that we know that we always have to follow. So we have the opportunity to do for 3D what Linux did to the operating systems. We're at that point where we have that kind of, where we can make that kind of impact with everyone. So a lot of it, to get there, there has to be part of what is the areas that you have to work on to get it there. And so we have our releases that come out. And right now our releases are focused on performance, stability, some of the usability enhancements. And so how people will actually use these elements to build the type of applications, these 3D applications of what they want to have, what they want to see, what drives them. But they've got to know that they can use it. And so that's why we're focused in these different areas on how they can do some of these elements. The big part of this also is that we want the areas that they're really focused in to be sharpened so that they know as they build on top of it, it's a stable foundation that has great documentation, great user support, so they can build some more, just some magnificent things. Now, of course, announcing that we've had here, because we see these builds, our version 22.10. There are a ton of things that came out in 22.10. You know, a lot of, again, performance, stability, but if we take a look at what really happened, easier onboarding collaboration. We heard the community. They said, look, it's really hard to get started on this. And we need to be able to, for one, for creators, I just need to get a copy, run it, go. And if I'm trying to build the code, I need it to be easier. I need only a handful of steps, handful of tools, and then I want to be able to have this thing build. So making it easier to onboard was one of the first key areas. And then, of course, some of the new rendering features. You know, this 3D engine is a Vulkan first-class citizen. This isn't where, hey, you have DirectX and it supports Windows and kind of, you know, Vulkan is a second thought, Linux is a second thought. Linux is a first-class citizen on this engine. And it's an important thing to remember because when you're looking at companies who want to do cloud computing or cloud GPU, they would rather fire up a Linux instance and they want all of the full support of the 3D engine, ray tracing, things that you'll find in Vulkan. And so that's a big difference with us of being able to do some of these pieces. And then, of course, multiplayer application enhancement, making it a lot easier to set up your multiplayer. If anybody's ever built a multiplayer application before, there is a lot of headaches and nightmares that go along with it, trying to replicate these entities and actions and all of that. Making it much easier for them to do that is a key element because that means they can do more experimentation. They can start building things very quickly at an early stage. Having the tools that can simulate and test ahead of time and still, instead of you having to build out a full piece of it is a big part of this. And then, of course, the artist workflow improvements. Being able to bring assets in, manipulate them, change them. Being able to work, say, in Blender and make all of your changes in Blender, and when you make them and you save them, you can easily export them and they change in the engine right away, hot-loaded. Things like that make it really easier, a lot easier. And then also having Python involved so that you can automate a lot of these workflows, making it easier. These are things that we're really focused on to allow people to create and to build the amazing things that they want to do. And then, of course, the improved viewport interaction, you know, which is a lot smoother when you're moving around entities and prefabs. and working in the elements within the editor itself. People like it to be just as smooth as kind of when they're playing. They expect their editor to act the same way. So this is an important part of this so that you can get that done. And then, of course, terrain. Terrain has been a big thing. When we first launched this off, there wasn't a lot of terrain support. Now there is a ridiculous amount of terrain support. As a matter of fact, it's probably one of the best systems we've seen in quite some time because it's not just limited to how do I make a blob and then put pieces on it. You literally can construct different continents. You can construct islands and bring them together and dynamically build all these pieces. And then you can go crazy with where should I put vegetation? Where is the snow line? How do I make where it says snow at an elevation or something like, where I want to place different areas of mud? You do these in, say, a 2D editor, and you move them to 3D, and they look amazing. They do all the blending of the textures and layers for you. Modularity. Big piece of this is the modularity, because not everybody wants to use the entire thing. Somebody may want to use the networking module and use it in another engine. They can. Somebody may find out that they love script canvas and they want to use it somewhere else. They can. This was built for modularity so that it's not just a game engine that you have to rip everything apart to build for an application. It is a modular engine. You shut things off in the modules without breaking the engine. And that's a key piece to that. So the gems themselves, we take a look at some of the ones that have been built that have been kind of instrumental, like Kythera AI. Some of the gems they've done so that you can actually do a lot of the artificial intelligence for moving things around, player entities. Having that in there has been kind of a key piece to allowing people to build these intelligent environments instead of having to build their whole entire pathing system and what they want to do in that. And then, of course, Cesium, which has been fantastic. They've got a digital twin plugin that you can have just baseline code with nothing preloaded, fire up Cesium, and it will stream in the world, textures, mesh, the whole 9 yards, as it's going along, just tiling in. So you're talking about building these huge environments with nothing preloaded. And then, of course, AWS, which without them, a lot of this wouldn't have started in the first place. But the thing with AWS is they've also looking outside of the box, such as the ROS2 gem. And this allows you to basically take this 3D engine and put it into a robotics environment where it can be subscribed and actually showing the visible viewport of what a robot is doing. What does it see? What is it learning? How is it moving around in the space? And so that's a big piece when we're talking about getting outside of the games industry. So at this point, why don't we hear from somebody actually who's working along with the project, Brian Chi, just for a moment.
Hi, my name is Brian Che, and I'm Chief Strategy Officer at Huawei. Yeah, Huawei's been doing quite a lot in the Open3D Foundation, and we were one of the founding members of the foundation as well. So a few of the things that we've been focused on, for example, we've taken a very strong focus on simulations. Simulations are one of the key ways in terms of how do you actually take the 3D objects and items that you're rendering, but turn them into things that you can actually interact with so that they reflect behaviors that you would see in the real world. Another very key way that we've been investing, and this is a newer area, is around the mobile space. So we're kicking off with other partners within the community. How do we really start to bring Open3D into the mobile space and start to bring it across different phones and other mobile devices. And then a third area is how do we start to build a lot of the cross-community cooperations with Open3D and other areas. We believe that standardization is also going to be really key as we take a look at the metaverse. How do we make sure that different assets are interoperable and exchangeable from one environment to another. In Open3D, because we're building a lot of the key technologies in open source, we think that bringing this as well as a lot of the standardization efforts that are going on together will really help things be able to interoperate and let's be able to build together these very, very large environments where everything needs to fit together. We fundamentally believe that as we go forward, there's very few industries that actually will not be impacted by 3D, and so this goes back to one of the reasons that we joined, the Open3D Foundation, is the opportunity for 3D. We believe that open source is really important and probably one of the best ways in terms of driving cooperation and collaboration to bring these kinds of technologies forward. I'd also add that it's important not just to have open source, but to also have open open governance around this project. This is another really important reason for the Open 3D Foundation, is that not only is the source code open for anyone to use and to bring forward, but there's also a very good cooperation model in place in terms of how do the companies come together, how do we work together, and how do we push this forward, both amongst ourselves, but also with other communities, all focused on the broader metaverse space. And so for us, open source and the way that we cooperate and the way that we need to bring everything together, this is a really, really key way in terms of how do we advance the state of the art.
How companies are looking at this and how they're working with the community to actually drive this forward. One of the things here is the interoperability. That's one of the areas that you really have to strive for to make sure that people can use this as a viable tool. That means the portability of assets and visual and media scripting. For whatever the application is they're trying to drive it for, that's a way to unleash that creativity of what they're trying to do. So the interoperability, if we take a look at part of it, when you start with the community, you actually have them where they're building a technology. And the technology itself then kind of starts to lead towards products. People can actually take these technologies and build products out of them that open up new ideas. Well, then they become different areas where you can apply them in the markets. And as those markets open up, that allows more participation to actually come back, and it completes the flywheel into the technical community. And this is how we operate and how we continually keep that flow moving. But from a company's perspective, they look at it from where they have their projects that can use these and work with the technical community as well as the technology. And as those projects get to use them, they wind up building new products as a result by using open source technologies. And those products then create profits, which allow them to contribute back into the project, back into the community, and invest more. So understand that when you're talking about open source and companies, they work very well synergistically together because they actually inure the benefit of the actions of each. And that creates that balanced flywheel of ecosystem between community and corporation. So it's never just always open source, and it's never just always company. It's that synergy that exists between both that allows them to grow. So let's take a moment and think about when Epic joined us. And so I've got a reel here for Mark Petit. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Petit. I'm from Epic Games, where I run the Unreal Engine ecosystem. It's been a pleasure over the past few years to see how Unreal Engine has been adopted not only in video games development, but in other industries and all kind of immersive interactive experiences on top of video games. For me, what's been fascinating over the past 6 years at Epic is to see the rise of real time, so that we can actually say today that, we can do in real time pretty much everything. So Epic joined the Open 3D Foundation because we see a world where the metaverse or the next generation of the internet will have to be about open standards and will have to be about interoperability. So I think when Royal called me, I thought it made a lot of sense for Epic to join and work with one of the most important open source project out there, Open 3D, and make sure that we walk the talk and understand how we build that element of interoperability. One of the things we wanted to achieve by joining the Open 3D Foundation is understand how we enable that mixing and matching of different software stacks to the profits of the game developers and the real-time developers around the world. So what I'm excited about the future is getting to the ultimate promise, real-time 3D, which is co-presence, which is having, the ability to do things with people without being with people. And that's probably going to take a lot of hardware, maybe some elements of what's currently known in VR. But I think I'm looking forward for times where, I can be with people and feel I'm with people virtually. And I think that's, for me, going to be the key wrap of everything we do, is that ability to have fun, to work, to collaborate online as real humans. What I would like to share with people today is the more we have a sense shared of timing, I think the better we'll be able to work together. I think, it's very important that we come together in places like the Open 3D Foundation, in other places like the Metaverse Standards Forum, and get ourselves involved in defining platforms, and that will be utterly important for ourselves and our kids in the future. It's time for us to take charge, show leadership, and create those platforms the way we want them to be.
The key part here, if you think about it, this is about working together. People have asked me all the time, well, aren't you in conflict? But open source isn't in conflict, because the difference is that we entice people, we tell them, take what you want. And if it works for you and you find something that you want to fix or change in it, contribute it back if you think it's good enough to contribute back. But take this. This isn't where I have to have one or the other. And as you can see from Mark's message, that is one of the strong points. Working together, building the communities behind this is the biggest part of it, because that's going to be what drives next generation of everything that we do. So going back to this here, to the Open 3D engine, when it comes to interfaces, being able to kind of, being involved with the places that are going to do this, like AR and VR, the first thing is virtual reality. Having an engine that can support 3D goggles, 3D interfaces, and do them kind of in real time for how we're trying to build those. And then also augmented reality. People think that the metaverse is just going to be inside of a set of goggles. Let me give you a hint. We have more of these on the planet as a phone than anyone else. You can bet AR is going to be one of the first stop shops of where you'll find this. And having the 3D engine that's lightweight, that's made for mobile environments, that's actually a big part of how you do that, so you don't wind up with a hot brick in your pocket from your phone because you're burning up all the battery. And then, of course, mixed reality. How will these come together when we start doing these kind of environments? And so having an engine that supports all of these, that also can work with other engine and work with other packages, is really important. One of the other things we want to announce is that we're forming a mobile SIG, which is basically dedicated to mobile devices. The key piece here is that we have this open source engine, and we have partners that are focused on mobile hardware. We talk about mobile hardware, that's your phone, those are your tablets. Even we're talking about the VR headsets and augmented reality things, they're all based on the same chipsets. But to do that, you have to really optimize the code so that it doesn't burn up the battery, so that it works great with these devices. So as a result, we have a mobile device working group that we're actually forming into a SIG that we would love everyone to get involved with, that's focused on optimizing and also standardizing some of the graphics APIs for 3D and in the mobile space, because it's kind of a little bit messy right now. And so it's a great opportunity for us to actually take control of that, help strengthen the standards so that when game developers or application developers are building a mobile, they've got the top notch to work with. And then, of course, kind of unleashing that creativity. As it continues to advance, we want to see the coolest stuff on these mobile devices, on these PCs, on these different applications. So we get the chance to take a look at what people's been doing. But it is still early days. But we're seeing a lot of really cool content coming out. And we're excited for the next 6 to 8 months. We have so many different pieces planned that new samples, new demos, new simulations, new content releases, people building games, building applications that we'll get to see coming out in the market. Collaboration. So in addition to what we're doing along with each other, we always kind of work with everyone to say, hey, whenever you have a problem, don't just sit behind closed doors. Work in the open community. Work within these channels. Talk with people. You would be amazed at what kind of support people are willing to give you as part of a community. And a lot of times, they're looking out for some of your best interests, or at least they can give you a perspective you haven't seen. Most of the time in the game development industry, or a lot of times in 3D, it's very closed, where nobody talks, and then a release comes out and they're like, well, why did you do that? You could have had that conversation. In an open source environment, you can. The other part is working with different partners. This engine is based in C++ and Python. So we've invited both the communities from people from the C++ community and from the Python community because they're really, really important. People love these tools. People love building in these tools. They literally make their livelihood from these tools. And bringing these communities in as the actual practical application of what they're doing, that's a big part of this. So it's not just, hey, let's build a theoretical thing. Here's a full-blown piece of software that you can make a living off of from your discipline. So the future really is about 3D immersive experiences. And it's the most exciting areas we're talking about, like the metaverse. We know that it's coming. We know that we have to work on the open standards, and we have the open source engine to be able to do this with. So at the end of the day, we believe that the vision of the Open 3D Foundation will be a huge enabler for the industry in general and a huge enabler for what's going on in the metaverse. We want to be on board from the start. We want to be the ones who are helping drive that with companies, with the communities, so that we can all come together as we're building this for what's amazing in the future. So we have a lot of different tracks also. We had a metaverse track that we ran here. We still have a lot of birds of a feather. And we have these so that these are all the different areas that are related to it. 3D is a big part of it. Open 3D will be a big part of it. I have conversations continuously with people, and they go, hey, what about metaverse? We know the Open 3D's got to be involved with it because open source has to be. I get this all the time. And so we've started up that conversation because we already know that we're a part of it. And with that said, thank you very much.